Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail. Today we're going to share 5 creepy Wendigo horror stories. First story. I hunted the Wendigo that ate my sister. Last summer, my younger sister went missing on a camping trip with friends. She had just turned 20, and we had started to drift away from each other. I got busy focusing on my own life. I left the country for a new job. When I came back at Christmas, I found out she had gone missing. It explained why she hadn't been answering my messages. I didn't understand why no one contacted me about her disappearance. The police claimed to not have my new number and didn't have access to her phone. I was certain her friends didn't want me knowing because they had time getting their story straight. I asked for a leave from work to track down those 4 friends. They all claimed that she had gotten up in the middle of the night to go to the washroom, and no one noticed she hadn't come back until the morning. I didn't buy it. They all said a slightly different location for where they camped that night. None of them gave collaborating details about the campsite. One said they used logs for seats. Another said the entire area was clear. They were lying where they had set up camp, and it caused the search team to be looking in the wrong place. I passed along the information, but since it was still winter, the rangers couldn't search the forest. They promised when the weather got better, they would try looking in other popular camping areas in case the 4 just got confused. Her friends smartened up and refused to speak with me. Threats of lawyers started. I couldn't do anything else but go back to work and wait till spring. I got the call at work that she had been found. Well, parts of her had been found. A man who had been panning for gold found some finger bones in the river. Soon, with more people going into the forest for the season, more pieces started to be discovered. In total, half her skull, some ribs, and the finger bones were discovered. There had been some larger bones that hadn't yet been fully tested to find out if they were hers. It may sound gruesome, but I demanded photos of each piece found. I felt as if the police weren't doing their job. They closed the case, saying she had just gotten lost. They claimed the damage to the skull could have happened after death. After I saw a photo of the femur, I doubted that fact. The marrow had been scrapped out. There also were scratches on the bone the police said were made by animals. It did appear to have been gnawed on, but not by sharp teeth. Our parents died when I was 17 and she was 14. When it happened, I promised to take care of her. I failed her. I assumed since she became an adult, I was no longer needed. I was wrong. If I couldn't save her, the least I could do is find out what happened. Too many things weren't adding up. I quit my job even though my boss said I could come back anytime. He's lost a child, so he understood how grief worked. I did some research and packed what was needed. Then I drove to a small town by the forest looking for answers. I questioned some of the local shop workers, trying to find out what happened before the group went into the woods. Apparently, my sister had become friends with those 4 locals she camped with. It was the first time they met in person, but talked a lot online. I asked if there was a reason why they suddenly decided to go camping. Anyone I spoke with suddenly started to avert their eyes, as if they knew more but didn't admit to it. There was an odd air about this town. Everyone appeared as if they were trying to cover up a darkness with fake smiles. After my short investigation, I headed over to the ranger station. I've spoken with them on the phone before, but I figured I would press my luck trying to get more information if they couldn't just hang up. Only 2 people were inside the small ranger station. An older man who was double my size, but I bet he was still fit enough to do his job. A younger woman who looked like she may be his daughter walked around the desk to greet me. She was extra friendly and reminded me a little of my sister. "I'm Dustin Hill. I've spoken to Ranger Dan before," I said, and her face dropped a little. Her smile was strained once she knew who I was. The other ranger didn't get up from his chair. His face was half hidden by a large local newspaper. He flipped the pages, trying to ignore me. "I have no news for you," he said, not even looking up. I wondered if he could feel my glare at the back of his head. The younger women looked between us in distress, unsure of what to say. "May I have a map of my sister's last location? I'm not from the area, and I don't want to get lost." The older ranger sighed and stood up. He sorted through some papers and grabbed a trail map. At least he was patient telling me which path to take and how long the hike would be. He had nothing personally against me. He just wished I accepted my sister was gone, and there was nothing I could do about it. I refuse to believe that fact. It's been a full season. I'm not sure what you think you might find. The female ranger said innocently. Anything. I told her and put away the map provided. I'll be staying in the forest for a while. Ranger Dan frowned. He crossed his arms, disapproving of my plan. Instead of trying to stop me, he gave me a single piece of advice. Bring a gun. I stopped at the doorway to let what he said sink in. Sure, there were bears in the area, but no one had been killed by one in over 5 years. I nodded silently, accepting the help. He must have some sort of unknown reason for acting so short with me. If I only knew what that was, I may be closer to finding out what happened to my sister. I would discover this town's secrets sooner than I thought. It was too late in the day to start at the campsite. I rented a motel room planning to set out in the morning. After it got dark, I put on my jacket to go outside for a quick smoke. I've been quitting on and off since my parents died. A figure pacing out by my window was also the reason why I decided to head outside. I startled the female ranger from earlier in the day. She had been trying to work up the courage to knock. She almost left when she saw me. It took her a moment to collect herself. It would be pointless going to that campsite. She told me. It is because my sister was never there. I asked her. Her lips tightened, showing that was the truth. She chewed on the inside of her cheek, not wanting to continue speaking. Yes, I hated lying. Where they really went is complicated. I don't think taking a hike is overly complicated. Tell me. I pressed after I lit a cigarette. My voice had grown cold after my sister died. I only care about finding out the cause and nothing more. I think my harsher demeanor unnerved a lot of people. They went to Rosethorn Cabin. It's a local legend around here. She started. My sister had always liked ghost stories and urban legends. She didn't know what she wanted to do as a career yet. The last I heard, she held down a few part-time jobs while trying to figure out the rest of her life. Had she come here because she wanted to write about legends? She had always been good at writing. 10 years ago, the 2 children of the mayor went to their cabin late in the season. A massive snowstorm hit. From what I heard, there was a misunderstanding where they were staying. It was a month before anyone figured out they were stranded in the cabin. When a small rescue team arrived, they found the son in good health, but the daughter was nowhere to be found. She let the implications sink in. It was a tragedy that didn't need to happen. But what does the death of a girl 10 years ago have to do with my sister? So, no offense, but I don't care what happened to them. I harshly said. After what happened, the mayor tried to pay people to keep quiet. The son went back into the woods to live in the cabin. Some people say it was to get away from people accusing him of a crime, but others claim something else. That he, became a Wendigo. She almost looked embarrassed saying the word. I've heard about them in passing. I wasn't into myths as much as my sister. All I knew about them was that you could become one if you ate human flesh. And for some odd reason, they had antlers and a lot of images people made of them. Why do they think that beyond the suggestion he ate his sister to stay alive? Did he start acting weird? Did he look weird? I questioned. He disappeared from the cabin after the first winter. People claim to see a pale, thin, wild man living in the woods. A few campers have gone missing only to have their bones to be found, but with the marrow gone, as if something had eaten it. She paused to rub her arms as if she had gotten a chill. She also started looking around, expecting someone to be listening to our conversation. I didn't believe in the whole Wendigo idea, but I would consider the Rosethorn son to have gone insane. She pulled out some papers from her back pocket and held them out for me to take. I'm sorry about your sister. Her death should not have happened. The mayor has since become a powerful politician. He's done everything in his power to ensure it's not well known that his son might be living in the woods, killing and eating people. Even if you find evidence that proves your sister was murdered by our local Wendigo, you may never be able to get the truth out there. Still, I made you a map of how to get to the cabin. I hope you find what you're looking for. I thanked her for the help, truly glad someone in this town was willing to tell me the truth. She soon left, not wanting to be caught. People of this town thought there was a monster in the woods. They had been tight-lipped for my safety. I finished smoking and then went back inside the small motel room, ready to try and get some rest. I would need it for the hike the next day. I checked out in the morning. I wasn't the best at reading maps, but this one was simple enough to understand. The trails up to the cabin weren't marked. They almost had been grown over due to lack of use. I needed to take a few breaks because my pack was too heavy. My job had always been in an office. I wasn't used to hiking. My body hated every moment, but I forced myself to carry on. I found the cabin a few hours before sunset. My stomach hurt from stress and hunger. I did listen to the ranger's advice. A small handgun that had once belonged to my father was holstered on my hip. We'd only gone shooting together once. After my sister disappeared, I went to the range to practice. Each time I imagined the target to be a bear or a shadow figure attacking her. It helped me improve quickly, but it didn't bring her back. No matter what I did, she would always be gone. The cabin was barely standing. The wood had rotted the elements without being maintained for so long. For some reason, the forest was quiet. The closer I got to the cabin, the less I heard the birds in the trees. Dark clouds covered the sun, giving the entire area an unsettling look. Soon droplets of rain started to come down. I didn't plan on staying inside the cabin. I went inside to avoid the rain, wondering if the weather would get so bad that it would force me to sleep inside for the night. The floorboards creaked with every step. Soon the rain and wind outside got so heavy it felt like the small cabin started to shake. It was a tiny space. There was only a living area with a small bathroom. No furniture remained. Only a rusted, useless stove. At least the fireplace still worked. It took a few minutes to get the fire going. Then I took out my flashlight, trying to see better in the gray light. The wooden floors were less rotten inside. There were some odd spots where someone had scrubbed them as clean as the old wood could be. I got down low to run my fingertips over old scratches on the floor. Tracing my fingers over them, I realized they looked to be made by something with 4 claws. For an hour, I crawled over the floor, desperately looking for anything. A scrap of fabric or some bloodstains. I needed proof that my sister had been here. Just before I gave up my light, caught something between the cracks of the floorboards. I used my Swiss Army knife and carefully lifted the small object out from between the 2 boards. When it was in my hand, my heart nearly stopped from pain. I held a small silver letter charm. When my sister graduated, I bought her a bracelet that you could add charms to. The first one was an L for Lexi. She hated going by Alex, but as a big brother, I used her full name to annoy her. I gave her the bracelet to apologize for not respecting her name and promised to be better. I expected to get emotional finding something of hers. I've been almost numb since I heard about her disappearance. Even thinking her name almost felt to be too much. But now I only felt a deep heat inside my chest. The charm was put away somewhere safe. I didn't care if whatever was in the woods was a Wendigo or a guy who just lost it. I was going to kill him. The storm outside picked up. At some points, the thunder and wind made the entire building tremble. I didn't want to be inside if the roof came down, but I wouldn't be able to see if I went outside. My stomach was too stressed for dinner. For hours, I sat facing the door with a blanket to try and keep away the early spring chill. I planned to stay out here for as long as my food held out for. I didn't need to wait that long. When the storm started to die down, an odd smell came into the air. I buried my nose in the blanket, trying to avoid it. It grew so strong my eyes started to water before I started to get adjusted to it. When I was younger, a trash bag broke when I tried to take it out of the can. Inside were some freezer-burned steaks we had thrown out along with other food waste. This smell was similar, but much more pungent than days-old rotten food sitting in the summer heat. Since the rain died down, I could hear the footsteps from outside getting closer to the door as the smell grew. My fingers tensed, ready to draw my weapon. So very slowly the door started to open, creaking as it did so. A tall, thin figure took a single step inside the cabin. My eyes had long since adjusted to the dark. Because of this, my body froze in fear seeing what had just entered the cabin. He wore scraps of dirty, stained clothing. The lips were torn away, revealing pale gums. This person had no muscle mass and looked to be a walking skeleton with a thin layer of skin clinging to their bones. Long, dirty fingernails gave the bony hand a dangerous appearance. For a moment, the eyes appeared to glow white, causing my heart to skip a few beats. When it met my eyes, it smiled and inhaled a rancid breath. I snapped down my trace. Within a second, I threw off the blanket and started firing. Even in the dark, I should have hit him at such a close distance. I lost count of how many times I pulled the trigger. Dark blood that appeared black poured from 3 bullet wounds on its chest, and yet those long legs covered the distance between us, showing not an ounce of pain. It fell on me. I kicked, threw punches, and did everything I could to get that vile creature away. To my horror, it started laughing. My arms were pinned down by strength it should not possess. I've never felt so scared and helpless before. "You smell like her," a low voice rasped. I felt as disgusted as I was angry. I hated this thing with every single fiber. Amused, he brought his face closer. The stench was almost overwhelming. Thick blood dripped onto my clothing, soaking through. Strangely, it felt ice cold. This terrifying creature couldn't be natural. "Are you jealous?" He spoke through rotten teeth. "You loved her, and yet I was the one to eat her. To have her be a part of me forever. Don't you wish it was you?" I shut my eyes, trying to force back the sheer rage. A chill ran down my back as my mind thought of something I tried to hide from. That I had nothing left of my sister. Everything she left behind didn't feel like hers. Not even the charm I found. She was gone from this world, and I couldn't seem to find anything to hold on to. A sound came from myself I first assumed was a wild animal outside. I forced everything into my arms to throw off this creature. It tried to recover and claw my face. In my fury, I lashed out and bit down so hard on one of its fingers that my teeth ripped it off. I spat out the foul thing, the blood almost like acid in my mouth. He reeled back in pain long enough for me to grab the blanket. In one swift moment, I tossed it over the creature's face, blinding it long enough to grab the pistol I had dropped in the earlier struggle. Pressing it to the creature's skull under the blanket, I fired until it was empty. More dark blood started to soak the material. With burning lungs, I crawled away, waiting for the thing to move again. Surely it was dead. It needed to be dead, and yet it sat up, black-stained blanket still over its face. Was I just seeing things? "Do you still love her?" It spoke in a garbled voice. "Shut up," I hissed. "She's still here." It raised pale, thin arms as if trying to offer something. I shook my head, trying to refuse what I was seeing. "I love you because she loved you. I took her into myself. We can all be together. Don't you want that?" Rage boiled over. A heavy-duty flashlight sat waiting on the floor next to my pack. I grabbed it in a blind rage. The first impact against the creature's skull painfully ran up my arm. After that, I don't remember much. Not how many strikes I brought down. Not when the flashlight broke and when I switched to my fists. Or when I broke my fingers from punching down as hard as I could. All while that monster laughed. I eventually collapsed. Body and mind were thin. When I woke, the light of dawn crept through the dusty windows. For a moment, I thought what happened had been a dream. When I sat up, I found the beaten body of the creature where I left it. I considered burning down the entire cabin with the body inside. My hands were so ruined from the beating that I couldn't light a fire. Instead, I dragged the body into the woods and then kicked leaves to cover as much of him as I could. When my hands recovered, I was coming back to set a much-needed fire. The hike back was brutal. Either I hid my broken hands well, or the owner of the motel didn't care. I knew I couldn't go to a hospital for my injuries. I just collapsed in the motel bed, tried to fight back the pain long enough to rest. A few hours later, a knock at the door dragged me from my nightmares. I almost didn't answer it. Just in case there was something wrong with my credit card, I opened the door wondering if I was going to be kicked out. Instead, Ranger Dan was on the other side holding a first aid kit. He silently walked inside. I let him work on the cuts and broken bones and was relieved it wasn't as bad as it felt. There were 2 sons, you know. He started not looking up from his work. The oldest son wasn't at the cabin with his younger siblings. He blamed himself for what happened and killed his younger brother. Then, the strangest thing started to happen. He grew sickly and distant. Soon, he left town for the cabin where his sisters had died. We all knew something wasn't right with him, but we didn't know how bad it was until the bones missing the marrow showed up after some hikers disappeared over the years. I chewed on my cheek, tasting blood. These people had known for years about the monster in the woods, and they had done nothing. My sister, my dear Lexi, was dead because of that. I sat grinding my teeth in silent anger. Are you heading home or somewhere else? The ranger asked in a serious voice. At first, I didn't know what he meant. I had killed what took my sister away, but I didn't feel as if I had a home to return to. It would be impossible to just go back to my regular life after this. He spoke again, and his next question made my body turn cold. Are you hungry? I was starving, which was to be expected because I hadn't eaten much in almost 2 days. This hunger was different. It hurt so deep down inside it should be impossible. Like a black hole had opened in my stomach. Why did you never kill what was in the forest? I asked in a shaking voice. For once, he answered my question. It can't be killed. He finished up his task and left the room, not even looking back. Once he was gone, my body started to shake. I was cold, so damn cold. No amount of hot water from the shower helped. Something was wrong with me, and I didn't want to admit it. I'm going back into those woods. I need to burn a Wendigo. But I didn't want Lexi to have died without anyone knowing what happened to her. I may not be able to come back out of those woods. Honestly, I would like to believe my mind snapped from the intensity of what happened. But didn't people say crazy people don't know they're crazy? I knew the vast, empty hunger was insane. I knew this cold running through my body wasn't natural. And I know sane people don't start chewing layers off their lips. I'm scared of what I'm becoming. Crazy or a Wendigo. Either way, I love my sister, and fire should solve this problem before I pass it on to someone else. Second story. There's something wrong with the deer in my town. Every expert in town read, not necessarily educated people who spent their entire life around deer, have no idea what the problem is. It's just the darndest thing has become the town's catchphrase lately, and it's the only thing anyone is talking about. Maybe you Redditors can help me figure this out and maybe even put a stop to it. Let me provide you guys with some background. I live in the town of Briar Ridge, Oregon. It's a small town encased in forest with one road in or out. There's a lot of rain, a lot of conifers, and a lot of deer hunters, mostly because there's a lot of deer and not much else to do. We have a hunting store, a grocery store, an A&W, a town pump, and that about covers it. In the summer, we get a few college kids here and there who want to try hiking, hunting, or camping. So they stay in the pass-through motel in town and get lost in the mountain range, and inevitably, every year some townsfolk organize a search party to back up the rangers until they're found. Some of the townsfolk who think they're hilarious have set up a betting pool of various criteria for the season's lost and found hikers. Age, size of the hiking party, level of actual preparedness, and level of drunkenness. These lost hikers are usually found within a few days, and by the end of summer, they all disperse back to whatever cave dorm they came from, and everyone goes back to business as usual. In the fall, the leaves just about suffocate every flat surface available to them, and the rain makes sure nobody is dry for a good couple of months. But it's also deer hunting season in the fall, so it's generally everyone's favorite season, and all the excitement, barbecues, and drunken bullshit begin and end there. In the winter, it's sometimes snowy, sometimes festive, always quiet. Except for the deer. I don't know what it is, but the peaceful quiet of the winter brings the deer out of the depths of the forest like moths to a lantern. One of my favorite things to do when I can't sleep is to put a coat and shoes on and walk out onto my street in my pajamas and watch the deer in the fog. It's beautiful in an ethereal kind of way to see their lithe forms calmly ghost through the night, lit up by the occasional street light. Some people feed them by putting out piles of corn and oats in their yards. Some people set up trail cameras. Most people just leave them alone. Everyone knows that the deer haunt the town at night, so the rare nighttime driver knows to drive slowly. But lately, something's changed with them, and I'm going to get to the bottom of it. It started with Miriam Miller hitting a deer on the Old Country Trail. The trail is a gravel road that leads to the Miller's homestead, a gourd and squash farm with a coopla chickens and a useless rooster. The Millers have lived here for 3 generations, building the homestead out of an old West cabin outpost, hence the name of the trail. My point is that Mrs. Miller has been driving that trail since she first got behind the wheel, and she has absolutely no reason to be driving faster than maybe 5 miles per hour. And yet the deer that went through her windshield looked like she had either driven into it at 60 miles per hour or it had full-on leaped into her windshield antlers first with the full intent to go through it. The latter one is the story she has been telling everyone since she got out of the hospital with all that bandaging around her head and chest. Mrs. Miller is 86, and with the blood loss and concussion, nobody really believed her at first. The second incident was when Rob, the owner of the hunting store, was out on his usual end-of-season deer hunt. Story goes, he had gotten to his usual spot, set up camp, and was trying to heat some dinner over his campfire. Rob isn't the brightest guy around, and he was opening a can with a knife. Inevitably, the knife slips and grazes his thigh with it. Not life-threatening, but it was bleeding pretty good. Halfway through patching up his leg, Rob spots a deer entering the clearing he had set up camp in. Rob reached for his rifle. He couldn't believe it. What hunter is so lucky the deer came to him? Easiest hunt of his life, right? Well, before he could even get his hands on the gun, the deer lunges at him and bites him. Hard. Not just once, but several times, drawing blood, kicking him to the ground, and pinning him there. As Rob tells it, the damn thing bit him hard enough on the forearm to break it too, and the cast proves the break. Just not necessarily that a deer did that to him. This is another one nobody would believe if it weren't for the flat, teeth-shaped wounds surrounded by ugly black and purple bruising. He says he eventually got his gun and shot at it, but he wasn't sure he even hit it since it was thrashing him around with its teeth like a dog trying to rip chunks off, and he was in a blaze of pain and panic. He called for help over the radio for the first time in his life. He's one of those super glue it shut and sanitize it with whiskey types. When the Rangers got there, the deer was long gone, but Rob was still laying in the dirt, clutching his rifle like it was the last rope to shore in the rapids, spouting off nonsense about hearing the mule deer's ears flap bent around while it wrenched its head back and forth, and how he ain't never seen hate in a deer's eyes before. Rangers said he looked like he lost a fight to a bear with dentures, not a vampire mule deer, but the bruising. You know how much force it takes for herbivore teeth to break skin? What to make a deer do that? Chronic wasting disease doesn't exist in Oregon. Epizootic hemorrhagic disease makes deer stupid and dead, not violent. And sure, plenty of hunters have been killed by deer defending themselves or wathaviu, but they kick and jab with their antlers, not bite like Cujo. Normally, I would shrug this kind of stuff off as bored small town people exaggerate stories for something to do. But I can't deny the proof in the injuries at least. There have been some other stories around town too. Matt, the Millers' teen grandson, swore up and down that a deer killed his cat and ate part of it. His parents keep saying it must have been a coyote or a bobcat, and Matt's just freaked out about the deer. But Matt will tell you he saw it, and that kind of panicked way only a kid who's seen too much but understands too little can. I kind of believe him. I don't want to get to the bottom of all this because of curiosity or because I think I'm so clever I can sleuth out what fish and game and the Rangers haven't been able to. I want to know because I'm scared. I woke up this morning around 3 a.m. with that sick feeling of dread that only accompanies a threat your primal animal brain has processed, but your conscious human one hasn't. I sat up and took a look out of my window, and what I saw struck me still. There was a deer standing out there, watching me sleep. It didn't spook when I spotted it. This thing was nose to the window, so close its breath fogged nearly the whole lower half of the window. I was frozen in place for what must have been upwards of 10 minutes, and I swear on my mother's life, I never saw that thing blink once. I understand now what Rob meant about the hate he saw in the deer's eyes that day. The night I met the Wendigo. At 10 feet tall, it towered above me. Emaciated arms grazed against the frozen ground with claws made of ice. Blood dripped from ragged, withered antlers. It looked at me with bloodshot eyes and gave me an all-too-human smile despite its long, needle-like teeth. As it leaned closer, I smelled the wicked stench of death on its breath. It drew back its head and let out a gut-wrenching howl that turned my blood to ice. Even so, I remained unfazed. Hypothermia had dulled my senses as the temperatures dropped. I had come here to die, and one way or another, it was going to happen. I was in too deep, and there wasn't much else to lose anymore. The thing happened to sense my acceptance of the inevitable and sat next to me. Surprised, I met its glance. "Aren't you going to kill me?" It looked down upon me, and something in its expression changed. For a split second, it looked wise, almost human. The sky grayed as it began to speak. "No." Its voice was low and rasping. "Your suffering now feeds me more than if you were dead." I stared off into the darkness. The thing next to me took out a glass jar. It was roughly the size of my head, but was dwarfed in the being's hands. As it opened it, its claws scraped against the glass like nails on a chalkboard. It looked down at me. "Your anger warms you now, but all fires burn out. You won't have much longer." It wasn't wrong. There was no way I should be alive right now. With a swift motion, it struck my face with its claw and sliced open my cheek. But no blood came. Instead, a milky, iridescent fluid leaked out of the wound. It billowed and swirled around my head. Memories. Beautiful, wonderful memories. I saw my sister, tall and lanky with wavy blonde hair spinning in her favorite skirt. I could almost hear her laugh, dancing to the radio at midnight when she thought no one could hear, squealing with delight as we sped down the highway with the windows down. I smiled, but soon the memories turned sour. I then saw her body limp and broken after I took that turn too fast. The car was crumpled into a tree, and I could only watch, helpless as my life burned to the ground in front of me. I felt the heat rise up in my chest, but the creature collected the haze around me in a jar and shut it. I snapped back to a cold, gray reality. I felt numb. I couldn't feel anything. I didn't know anything. Who I was, where I was, or what was sitting in front of me with a terrible smile on its face. But at that point, I couldn't even care. "She forgives you," it said as it lumbered off into the night. I didn't know who he was talking about, but the snow around me had formed a warm blanket, the stars began to fade away, and I knew then that it was time for me to go. Fourth story. A town without doors. I don't remember much from my childhood. I lived in a small town south of Krakow with my mom, dad, and 2 sisters. Those early days are a blur, but I remember going door to door around the neighborhood, asking for treats during the Dozinki Harvest Festival. It was a tradition of ours, since we knew the neighbors always bought too much candy. We'd gather leftovers and make a feast of our own. At every door you were greeted with a cheeky smile as the neighbors lovingly cussed out the scoundrel children of the Dabrowski home. Of course, happy memories are happy for a reason, because things get worse and you get something to compare them to. My parents separated. My mother moved us to Warsaw, where we could be closer to my grandparents and uncles. Meanwhile, my father, Yarmer, did his best to stay in our lives, but it got harder and harder. He needed to work longer and longer hours, but he still sent us money every month. He wanted us to have a beautiful life, even if he couldn't be there for it. With every passing year, those visits grew further and further away. First, we lost Easter, then Christmas, then the birthdays, and finally, our yearly Dozinki festival meetup. Last we heard of him, he was barely making ends meet. He wasn't sending money anymore, and over time, he disappeared into memory. My mother remarried. My sisters graduated. My oldest sister moved to Ljubljana, while my younger went to Munich. My mother stayed in Warsaw with her new husband, but once the kids were out of the picture, she moved into her summer home up north. I love my mother dearly, but she's always had an eye for the luxurious. Always planning the next trip, the next sun-baked afternoon. I stayed in Warsaw. I got myself a degree in sociology and managed to hold on to a low-rank government job at ZUS overseeing private claims. It wasn't glamorous. It was mostly being yelled at in different ways, but it paid the bills. A mind-numbing battle of making decisions, defending them, and making them again. The year I turned 24, I got a letter from an estate lawyer. Turns out, my father had passed away. This wasn't recent. According to the papers, he'd passed away several years ago. Some kind of accident with farm equipment. He didn't have a proper will, and dividing the estate among his living descendants hadn't been a state priority. It got lost in a folder somewhere, and now it had floated back up. They divided everything equally between me and my sisters. My youngest sister got his savings. My oldest got his car and valuables. And I got the house. I called the others to check who wanted to go see his grave. No one wanted to. They were all tangled up in their own lives and troubles. My family were under the impression that my father had abandoned us, and this was a way for us to abandon him back. I had a different impression. I always thought he was just working too hard. I decided I'd take some time off work to collect his things and check out the property, trying to get a better idea of why he distanced himself from us. And maybe I could get a better picture of my early life, that time where I was greeted with a smile rather than a complaint. It was a long drive. The roads out there aren't the best. It's a very small community with no more than about 250 people, most of which are wheat farmers, and there's not that much to do. There are only two things other than farms, a church and a store. Everything else is either too far away or too irrelevant. Going past the endless fields, I got so lulled into a rhythm that I almost missed the exit. It's so small that you can accidentally pass it by if you don't take the right turn. There are no signs. You can only recognize it from the church in the distance. I took a left turn and prayed to God the suspension would hold a little longer. I decided to pay the old church a visit. We'd spent a lot of time there. There was plenty of parking. It was smaller than I remembered, but then again, everything looked bigger back then. There was something uneasy about coming home after so long. As I stepped out of the car, it all just came back to me. The smells, the sounds. Even if you can't put your finger on it, there's something that tickles the mind as if to remind you, this is where you belong. Welcome, a voice called out. Sorry about the state of things. I turned around to see a man, a couple of years older than myself. He had well-combed hair and thick glasses. He was wearing a priest's garb. I'd almost forgot. The village priest had been old even back when I was young. No wonder there was a new one. I'm Father Cherniak, he continued. Are you new in town or passing through? I grew up here, I said. I'm one of the Dabrowski kids. Sorry, I'm not familiar, he smiled. I only came here last winter to pick up the work from Father Golick. He lived until last winter. I asked, are you sure? Quite so, he laughed. 101 years old. I can't believe it, I smiled. God really does have a sense of humor. Father Cherniak showed me around. He told me his plans for refurbishing the windows. But the one thing that irked him more than anything was the doors. See, they were gone. The church was wide open. It's a local superstition, he sighed. A shepherd needs his gate to tend his flock. But every time I put the doors up, someone takes them down. Strange, I said. I've never heard that before. Really? I thought you were from the area. Guess I've been gone too long, Father. The church looked naked in a way. No barriers. I could see the gravel they dragged in, forgetting to wipe their feet. Father Cherniak had tried to put up some curtains, but the wind had torn them down piece by piece. Before I left, he showed me my father's grave. It had been vandalized. The headstone had tipped over, and there were no flowers. I promised myself to make it a little nicer before I left, but I didn't understand. Sure, my family wasn't perfect, but we'd never been hated. This grave looked outright despised. I thanked Father Cherniak and made my way across town. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. All through town, there were these wide-open houses just like the church. At first, I thought it was some kind of summer cleaning going on, but no, all doors were gone. They weren't just open, they were removed. I could see all the way into people's living rooms. The hustle and bustle as homeowners moved from kitchen to bedroom, talking amongst themselves. I slowed down and looked a little closer. Not a single room had a door. Not even the bathrooms. A couple of them had curtains or insect nets put up, but no doors. House after house, completely open to the elements. A couple of them had welcome mats by the windows in their living rooms, as if to show that this was the way to enter. A couple of them had completely bricked the entrances where their front doors used to be, sealing it. Sure, small towns can get a bit quirky, but I'd never seen anything like this. I pulled up to an all-too-familiar driveway and gasped. I couldn't recognize my home. It had been vandalized. Every window broken, every door removed. I could see rats scurrying around. Walking around the property, things got even worse. There'd been a small fire in the backyard, spreading to the outer wall of the kitchen. It wasn't completely burned down, but you could probably punch straight through with little effort. And finally, on the far side, neon green spray, paint reading Sin Diablo, Son of the Devil. I couldn't believe it. They'd even clipped the chains off our swing set, leaving a rusted metal skeleton. It looked like someone had tried to start a tire fire, but couldn't quite get it going. I had a hard time even picturing what it used to look like. There was this bottomless hole forming in my stomach where every smile I remembered seemed like a cruel taunt. Something must have happened. Something I'd never even heard of. Coming back around, I noticed a crowd of middle-aged men. They were standing just outside the property, looking over my car. I didn't recognize any of them. "You with the bank?" one of them asked. "No, I'm the Dabrowski kid," I said. "The son." "You're the son?" he spat. "You want to join him in hell? Is that it? You know who did this?" I snapped back, pointing at the house. "Was it you?" "Could have been anyone," a man in the back added. "Deserved it." One of them gave me a knowing smile and nodded at the graffiti. They whispered something among themselves, letting out a chuckle under their breaths. They scoffed at me and wandered off, spitting curses and sneers. Not quite the welcome I'd imagined. I'd initially planned on sleeping in the old house, but there was no way. Not only was it wide open, it was a disgusting mess. I'm not going to go into detail what they'd done to the place, but I'd be lucky if I was able to give it away in its current state. I decided to spend the night sleeping in my car. I leaned the seat back and wrapped myself in a blanket, hoping it wouldn't get too cold. I spent some time on my phone, but I didn't want to use all the battery. But somehow, I still ended up staying awake long past midnight. But there was something beautiful about that night. The sunset was one of the few things that didn't change around those parts. Watching the sun go down over the same old fields gave me that feeling that some things never change. I remember waking up sometime around 2 a.m., seemingly for no reason. It wasn't cold, there was no one bothering me, and no notifications on my phone. A careful wind brushed against the hood of the car. I lay there for a moment, trying to ignore the texture of the seat sinking into my sweaty skin. I filtered out the sounds of nature bleeding in from outside. A distant part of me had heard them all before. I listened past the songbirds and the insects in the fields. And beyond that, there was something else. Something in the distance. A wail. A deep, sorrowful wail. The following day, I took some time to walk around town. The rumor that Yarmer's kid was back had spread like wildfire. I could tell by the sideways looks as people passed me on the street. The only ones who didn't seem to care were the kids, and they were few and far between. At the far end of the town, there was this long brick wall. It wasn't very high, but it was dense. It had doors built directly into it. Dozens of them, every door from every house in the neighborhood. They jammed them all straight into the brick. I couldn't see ours, though. It had an eerie look to it. Maybe 100 or more doors, all built to never be opened. I couldn't help but touch a few handles, making sure they didn't budge. There were a couple of teenage kids standing at the edge of the wall, observing me. I walked up to them, surprised to see they didn't back down. They had a cocky look to them, but at least they weren't openly hostile. Before I could say anything, they turned to me. "My mom hates you," one of them said. "What did you do?" "I used to live around here," I said. "Came to get some things." "Why'd you come back?" he scoffed. "I'm leaving the moment I can afford it." "Same," said the other, rolling an unlit cigarette between his fingers. I gave him a tired look. A man passed us further down the street, throwing daggers at me with his eyes. Talking to the wrong person would get my teeth knocked out for sure. I turned to the kids, lowering my voice. I'm Dabrowski's son, I admitted. That's why they hate me. The second kid nearly dropped his cigarette. I managed to bribe them into a conversation with the promise of a six-pack from the next town over. In return, they'd give me the unofficial tour of what had happened these past few years. A fair trade, I suppose. I'd apparently missed quite a lot. We wandered to the east side of town. There was an old farm that had stood there for ages. It didn't really have a name. It had just been part of the background. It was barely even a frame anymore. It was just the outline of what had once been a home. It had started years ago. People heard knocking coming from that ruin. It used to have this door that still stood, clinging to the edge of a rotted-out door frame. You could hear it at night, one of the kids explained. Knock, knock, like a door to hell. Sounds awful, I said. Not to everyone, the other kid sighed. There was one guy who liked it. It wasn't a hard guess as to whom that might have been. Rumor was my dad had gone up there one night and opened the door. It had crumbled off the hinges, and according to the townsfolk, something stepped through. Some called it the devil. A couple of kids thought it was an alien. Most locals just called it Sleepyek. It came through, and the door broke, the first kid said. And now it can't go back. Are you saying it's still here? I asked. It's real. Well, yeah, he laughed. Why do you think this place is so messed up? Then what's with the doors? It's looking for a way back to hell, he said. And when it can't find the right door, it gets angry. And then it hurts people. Sleepyek. That's what they called it. An ugly word for a blind man, or mole. They like to call it that because of its terrible vision, mistaking every door for the one it was looking for. For years, Sleepyek had moved from house to house, knocking on every door it could find. And if someone opened, it would do something terrible. People had gone missing. A couple had died. I drove my adolescent guides to the other town over to get them their promised beer. They told me all they could as we went. It felt a bit weird driving off with a couple of teenagers, but I got the impression that these two had done far worse for far less. Delinquents, but honest ones. At first, people had hidden in their homes, but then Sleepyek had knocked until the doors broke. Then it would knock on the inner doors. So over time, people removed their doors. Those who didn't would get a visit at some point. With all the discarded doors, they built the brick wall, tricking Sleepyek into knocking around at night. This can't be true, I said. It's absurd. It's true, the first kid said. That's why they hate your dumb dad. He let it in, but it doesn't make sense. Why don't you just pack up and leave? The first kid said. I told you. The second kid pondered the question for a while, then shrugged at his friend. He answered as if he'd thought about it 100 times. Wizardsy dobers, LW domen nagelpeach. Everywhere is good, but home is best. Of course he'd say that. Come hell or high water, home is home. I got them their six-pack and some fast food. I got some for myself while I was at it. It wasn't a long drive all in all, but long enough to be a bother. By the time we got back, it was almost dark. They rushed out of the car, waving a hasty goodbye. As they did, the second kid called back to me. Go see for yourself, he said. Sleepyek comes out at night. He pointed down the street towards the brick wall. I nodded at them in a silent thanks. I didn't believe them. I had to see Sleepyek for myself. If what I'd heard the previous night was any indication, Sleepyek would be out somewhere after midnight, so I went to bed early. And when I say bed, I mean sleeping in my car for the second night in a row. I was miserable. I considered leaving first thing in the morning, but there was this deep sadness in me that I couldn't shake. This was my old home. I'd played in these fields. It felt wrong knowing I was no longer welcome. My dad was many things, but no devil's son. If he opened that door, it must have been for a good reason. And if he let through something that shouldn't be here, it must have been an honest mistake. He was not an evil man, but he was fallible. Then again, maybe he didn't have a choice. Maybe Sleepyek didn't give him a choice either. I must have nodded off at some point. I forgot to set an alarm, but I still woke up at about 2:30 a.m. I considered going back to sleep, but I decided to have one last look around town. I'd promised myself I would. So I got out of the car, stretched, and listened. It was easier that night. There was a noise that cut straight through the ambience, that wailing. It was clearer. Even in the dark, I could tell where it came from. The houses had turned off their lights, leaving the streets lit up with nothing but the moon. Still, I knew those streets. I could follow them in my sleep. I made my way to a dirt path, leading me past the two houses at the edge of town and straight to the brick wall. At that point, I could hear it clear as day. It was a man wailing at the top of his lungs, crying his soul out, bawling like a child. I could see the brick wall in the distance. The sharp contour of the bricked-in doors stood out against the moonlight like a long, flat, abstract painting. And in the middle of it all, there was a dark silhouette. It looked like a man. Sort of. I couldn't really tell what he was like. He had a bulky jacket on. He was pulling on one of the doors, smacking it over and over with a closed fist. It was the same pattern over and over. Pull, smack, smack. Pull, smack, smack. And in between every attempt, he jerked his head around, crying desperately. I considered walking up to him. This wasn't some kind of devil. This was a heartbroken man. As I took a few steps closer, I noticed something in the corner of my eye. A light. I turned around only to notice a small flashlight coming from one of the nearby houses. They were filming me with their phones. Looking closer, I could see two little heads peeking out, shaking their heads in a certain no. Turning back to the brick wall, I heard a sudden crack. The man had pulled one of the doors straight out of the wall. It came loose. He set it down next to him, and with one hand, pushed it downward. He didn't even have a good grip, but with a single hand, he broke the door into pieces. The wailing turned into a scream. Rage. Unfiltered, unhindered rage. With just his fingers, he began to rip bricks straight out of the wall, tossing them around like leaves in the wind. I could hear them landing around me, kicking up tufts of grass. I backed away as the lights in the house went out. The little heads dipped away from the window. I hurried down the dirt path as I watched Sleepyette climb on top of the brick wall, screaming at the top of his lungs. Even at a distance, I could tell something was off. His proportions seemed wrong. It was hard to tell. He'd wrapped himself in some kind of dark fabric, but something about him didn't look right. I didn't stop to stare. Say what you will. Maybe it was just a strange man. Either way, I was looking at something dangerous. And when the locals turn to hide, you do best to follow suit. So I hurried down the dirt path, hearing his terrifying scream echo across the fields. I barely slept that night. It is one thing to believe in monsters and another thing to see them. As soon as the sun rose, I drove off. But as I went past the church, I noticed something. There was a white van outside, and one of the church doors had been put back up. There were two men on ladders getting ready to put the other door up. It was hidden under a tarp just off to the side. I could see Father Cherniak up front with a big smile on his face. I decided to see what was going on. Surely, he had to know what the hell he was doing. The moment I parked my car, Father Cherniak waved me over. He was right next to me before my boots hit the gravel. "Welcome back," he smiled. "Glad to see you haven't left us yet." I closed the car door and yawned a little. "What are you doing?" I asked. "What is this?" "You inspired me," he said. "For an outsider, this place must have looked awful. I saw it, you know. I saw it in your face." He turned back to the church as the two carpenters began tipping up the second door. "It must be dignified," he continued. "Our Lady deserves better, don't you think?" "This is a bad idea," I said. "I've seen that thing around town." Father Cherniak shook his head and put a hand on my shoulder. This was a man who was trained to talk to people. I could tell. If the Lord's house can't shelter you from the devil, what can? In exchange for a little manual labor, I was offered a hot shower and a proper meal. After sleeping in my car for a couple of days, I couldn't say no. Smooth talker or not, Father Cherniak seemed an honest man. He believed what he spoke of. As the hours passed, more and more people dropped by. Mostly townsfolk coming by to cuss him out for being an idiot. Some of them threw rocks at the doors, demanding he take them down. Others, in turn, thought it was about time someone at the church had some balls. Just like Father Cherniak had said, if a house of the Lord can't shelter you from evil, What can? By late afternoon, there was a significant gathering of people. Even those who had acted in anger earlier in the day were swayed. The argument was simple. Do they not trust in God? There was a bit of a cookout. Some brought sausages or steak for dinner. I spotted the two teenagers in the crowd, stealing a bit of wine from one of the elderly. I lost track of time. It felt a bit like the harvest festival back in the day, something that drew the town out of hiding. The sounds and smells were the same, and I could see from the smiles in the crowd that I wasn't the only one feeling that way. Later in the day, Father Cherniak held a sermon. I don't remember much of it. I was having trouble staying awake. That, if anything, felt just like when I was a kid. It's amazing how something as stiff as church pews can be so lulling. But there was one part that stuck with me. The door is a threshold, he said, and the door of a church is the threshold between the vile and the sacred, between sin and saint. We can no longer live in uncertainty. We must live as we teach, and we are proud to say we have been taught well. The sermon continued into the evening. It ended just after sunset. Some people wandered home, but others were shamed to stay. It was no longer just a public gathering. It had turned into a challenge. The faith of the congregation pitted against the devil itself. Some went home to gather blankets and pillows, laying down to sleep on the floor. This wasn't easy for them. Some talked about the people who'd disappeared over the years. People who'd opened the door when Sleepyek first came to knock. An elderly woman had gotten her neck broken. One man had been dragged out into the yard and hung from a tree. Another man had been mutilated. It pulled his arm right out of the socket, they whispered. We found it across the street. I tried talking to people, but it was clear that no one wanted anything to do with me. I was still Yarmer's boy. The only ones who didn't seem to mind were the two teenagers I talked to earlier. Later that evening, they walked up to me, probably just to piss off their parents. Aren't you scared? One asked. Should I be? It's got a bloodied tooth for you, the other said. I don't think so, I smiled. I've only seen it once. Yeah, but dash. They quieted down, looking at one another, then back at me. I was missing something. Your dad, they said. Sleepyek got him. Did no one tell you? They hadn't. Turns out, it wasn't malfunctioning farming equipment that had killed him years ago. It was Sleepyek. My dad had been the first victim on the list. Most of the villagers had considered this a sinner getting his just reward. Others figured that if you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. They'd found him tangled in the swing set, his body broken and mangled. The kids left me alone with my thoughts for a while. They could tell I wasn't all there. It was one thing to have him dead, but to die in such a horrifying way was unthinkable. I could barely picture him in my mind. And now there was a new image vying for my attention. Rattling chains, dripping blood. But there wasn't much time to think. As the clock passed midnight, someone came knocking. The church fell silent. Something pulled on the handles. 2 smacks. Pull on the handle again. These doors were massive, and the hinges had just been reinforced, but I could still see them struggle. Father Cherniak took a deep breath. As the congregation fell silent, he spoke aloud. This is no place for sons of sin, he said. There is nothing for you to corrupt. It all stopped. We all breathed a sigh of relief. But the 2 teenagers didn't look too convinced. They'd huddled up on the far side of the church. There was an emergency exit in one of the side rooms. The door moved again, this time with more determination. The handles were pulled even harder, and the smacking made the entire slab of wood crackle like a sinking ship. Then, the wailing. The loud, desperate wailing. As soon as I heard it, I could see the color drain from the congregation's faces. The door was pulled back and forth, back and forth. A chandelier started to shake. The door's coming down, someone called out. It's coming down now. Father Cherniak tried to calm them, but it was too late. People flooded the rear exit of the church, trying to get away. I was pushed aside without much thought. If the Dabrowski kid bit the bullet, all the better as far as these people were concerned. There is no sin in the house of the Lord. Father Cherniak yelled. There is no sin. The devil can laugh and jeer as much as he likes, but there is no place for his evil. But thoughtful words can't stop a broken door. Sleepy Ek wasn't deterred. The doors came down. There was a pause in the air as they fell. The air swept through the room, blowing out most of the candles among the pews. As the doors hit the ground, the crowd panicked. Most of them were already on their way out. People screamed. Others cursed. I was in the far back of the crowd, and it was clear I was never going to make it out without being crushed. I settled instead for hiding among the front pews, hoping the dark would shield me. I could barely see Sleepy Ek in the flickering candlelight. His right arm had grown out of his shoulder blade, and his left arm was so long that it scraped against the floor. He had a sort of hunchback pose, but there was something that kept moving on his back, fluttering like a shivering membrane. He wasn't wearing a coat. He just wasn't human. He looked like something vaguely trying to resemble a human. Even Father Cherniak ran, hiding behind the altar. Sleepy Ek rushed through the room in a messy gallop, knocking over pews as he went. They didn't even slow him down. When he got to the side room, people had already run screaming into the night. Sleepy Ek couldn't catch them. Instead, he settled on throwing things across the room, tearing down whatever he could reach and breaking whatever he could lay his hands on. His wailing had turned to rage, and he was out of control. I was laying flat on my stomach, crawling away. Father Cherniak wasn't so lucky. Just like Sleepy Ek had done with the brick wall, he climbed up on the altar. From there, he could see the priest. I don't like to recall what I saw. It's unworthy to make spectacle of tragedy. But Sleepy Ek didn't care for titles or words. He didn't care about anything. He picked Father Cherniak up with a single arm, holding him outstretched in front of him like a child considering an unfamiliar vegetable. Father Cherniak tried his best. In between desperate cries, he said the most powerful words he knew. He compelled. He demanded. And when nothing seemed to work, he begged and prayed. Then Sleepy Ek unhinged his jaw like a snake. The screaming stopped with a snap as a spray of blood shot out. Something thumped against the altar and rolled onto the wooden floor. A pair of glasses clattered against the ground. Sleepy Ek spat and coughed, picking tufts of hair from his teeth. He let the body slip from his grip, drooping unceremoniously to the red carpet. I remember crawling. I crawled as quietly and carefully as I could. Sleepy Ek was big, but his footsteps were light, like he was tiptoeing everywhere he went. I didn't notice he was behind me until his shadow drowned me. I rolled around, only to see his vast shape towering over me. He must have seen me. There were still a couple of candles. For a moment, I saw his face. A half-made gray thing with black, inward-leaning concave eyes. A faint shimmer, like scales from a fish. A human mouth with an extra mandible. A twitching nose adjusting to the smell of burnt wax and blood. Viscera still dripped from his strange lips. Then he grabbed me. Carefully. Slowly. I closed my eyes as I was pulled in closer. He looked at me. He looked close. I could feel the heat of his mouth. Perhaps I'd be tastier. Then he made a noise. I can't put my finger on what kind of noise it was, but I'd never heard it before. A squeal, perhaps. A confused rattle. He put me back down. I opened my eyes as those large black eyes turned away from me. He was leaving. His rage subsided. As he dragged his long arm across the floor, his wailing bubbled back up. But it wasn't as desperate. It was confused. The effects of the attack was immediate. Someone to get their hunting gear. Others were blaming the priest, saying he wasn't holy enough. Others were leaving town entirely. After all, if God couldn't save them, they had to save themselves. I made my way back to my father's home. There was so much he'd never told me, and it was too late to ask. I had no idea what kind of mess he'd been wrapped up in, but I couldn't stand by and wait for it to blow over. If this was his fault, if all of this was his fault, I'd gladly join the others to spit at his name. But I couldn't do it without knowing for sure. I had to be sure. I went room by room, pulling out drawers and kicking over boxes. I threw around moth-eaten clothes. I tipped the bed. I dragged down the wardrobe, crashing it into the wooden floor, hoping I could find something, anything to answer my questions. Finally, I ran out into the backyard. I I saw the stains on the swing set. I remember him pushing me on it, making the chains creak as I went higher and higher. But now that noise meant something else. Something dark. An image of a broken man, wrapped in a forgotten toy. I don't know how long I went berserk on that house, but I remember finally just taking a swing at it. As I mentioned, a part of the kitchen had burned. You could punch right through it. So I did. Turns out, there was a secret panel beneath the kitchen sink. I didn't register it first. I just thought I'd hit a second, harder wall. But as I calmed down and looked a little closer, I realized it was a small compartment under the sink. I'd punched right through from the outside. I sat down flat on the wet grass, feeling it soaking into my jeans as I dug around. There was a box. Most of it was tainted by rats. Part of it was burnt, but there are little bits and bobs that I could make sense of. Family albums, mostly pictures of me and my sisters, friends from around the village. A picture of Dad next to his first car. Pictures from our Facebook, printed and framed. The kind of things one would like to keep. Then the pictures stopped. No more dates, no more birthdays. Nothing. But I kept turning the pages, and in the back there was something else. Other pictures. Notes. Pictures of a door, with a text written on the back. It's not screaming, it's crying. Little notes on the margin, saying it was afraid. It was lost. That no one listened, and that no one cared. There were no more pictures, but there were notes. He had to get out, wants to stay. He hunts elk in the forest, brings it to me. There's nothing left for him. I understand. It told a story of my father trying to help something that didn't belong. Something from another place. They shared meals and kindness, trying their best to find common ground. This had, seemingly, gone on for months. It spoke of spring and later winter. I will let him sleep in the house, the final note said. Maybe it can help his night terrors. Something must have happened. A dangerous creature like that, inside a small house. Maybe there was an accident, a misunderstanding. Maybe it strung him up by the chains to make him look alive, like a puppet. Either way, I was close to an answer. Maybe I was looking more like my father than I'd realized. Looking back at it, I felt like a sleepwalker. I wasn't thinking clearly. Maybe it was the adrenaline. I walked around in a daze, making my way back into town. It was quieter now. Many had rushed to their cars. I followed the dirt road back to the brick wall, and I found him, Sleepy Eck, wailing weakly, tapping against the bricked-in doors, pulling a little on a handle, hoping against hope that something would happen. He wasn't angry when I approached. He was confused. I had to make him understand, to see the truth of things. So despite everything I'd seen and everything I heard, I decided to trust my instinct. My father had made many mistakes, but he was no fool. His mistakes were honest. So if this was a mistake, I prayed to God it would be an honest one. Follow me, I said. This way. Sleepy Eck had feather-light steps. I could still hear commotion around town, but it was all swallowed by that soft wailing. Sleepy Eck couldn't stop himself. We made our way to the cemetery, to the overturned headstone and the overgrown lot. I tapped the ground, looked at this creature, and said as simple as I could. Here, I said. Father. Perhaps it understood me. Perhaps it didn't. But it could rip out handfuls of dirt like if it was nothing, and it did. It took a long time, but not as long as it should have. My dad had not been buried deep, or well. Just as no one had cared for his funeral, no one had cared about his resting place. It didn't take long for Sleepy Eck to make his way down, and as his hands hit the casket, I looked down to a curious sight. See, my father had died poor. So poor that they hadn't put much effort into his casket. It was more like a box, and the lid looked familiar. Looking a little closer, I realized it was a door. The actual front door of our house. They'd just thrown it on and called it a day. Sleepy Eck stroked the door with his long fingers, his wail slowing to a hum. He'd finally found the right door, the one he'd been looking for. I'll never forget that image for as long as I live. An ungodly creature breaking open the casket lid, pushing away a bed of dry blue sunflowers, lifting a long-forgotten corpse from its resting place, cradling it like a mother calming a crying child, its wailing turning to a quiet sob. Tada, he cried. Tada. Sleepy Ek wandered off into the night, past the men with guns and those hunkering down in their houses. He did not care. Maybe he'd never cared. Maybe he'd just been angry that he couldn't find the right door. But as the chaos settled, there'd be no need to hide your doors any longer. Sleepy Ek was gone. I sold my father's property, but kept the photo albums. His name is still spoken like a curse, but at least there's nothing to keep that curse alive. There have been no more sightings of Sleepy Ek, as far as I know. The locals didn't want to point fingers at the devil when they called the authorities. Some tried, but it's easier to convince people of a killer rather than a monster. There were inquiries around the countryside, but as with most things, it was left in an open-ended folder in an office somewhere. Unsolved. Deprioritized. I returned to Warsaw. It might not be my home, but home is not just a place, it's a time. And that time has long passed. It has taken some effort to accept that for now, I might not have a real home. But that doesn't mean I'll never have one. Much like Sleepy Ek, I think there's a struggle in finding someplace you belong. But over the southern countryside, the forest lies still. There is no wailing, no knocking, no screaming. And I think that somewhere beyond the trees, anyone can find a place to call home. Fifth story. A Wendigo is watching me. Recently, a few months ago, I moved into a new house in the mountains. It's almost always cold and I'm surrounded by woods, but I like it as it's easier to do my job in isolation with little distractions. I sell paintings and am paid a small monthly check to write poems for a magazine that is both online and physical. The new surroundings have given me all sorts of inspiration, both for writing and painting. The strange occurrences started about a week into me living here. More and more frequently, I'd find dead animals nearby. Not really gored or anything. Just dead. Rabbits, birds, and the occasional fox. It freaked me out, but I just assumed a predator of sorts was showing off because they felt threatened by me. I decided to always carry around a gun and a taser, just to be safe. I also decided to call an expert of the mountains and asked him to visit. When he came, he seemed worried. Now, this man was a fairly old Native American who had lived on these mountains for about his whole life. So this concerned me, knowing he knew just about everything on this mountain. He sat me down and told me a tale of a dark creature born of hunger and cold, a Wendigo. I was skeptical. This was a creature of fiction, at least. I thought it was. He left with a stern warning to never stray too far from home without good reason, and never follow the voices of the forest, as it may be a Wendigo luring me to their feeding grounds. I spent the next few days watching the woods closely. Maybe if I got a glimpse of whatever was in the woods, my mind could be put at ease. At first I saw nothing. Then I saw swift movement among the underbrush and trees. It wasn't until around the fifth day of watching I saw something clearly, something standing upright, with deer-like legs, staring at me with pale eyes. I quickly went inside, suddenly feeling chilled to the bone. It took a bit and some self-pumping before I could go back outside to do my painting and wood watching. I found myself putting what I could see of the creature in my paintings, but I could never catch the coldness of its eyes quite right. It fascinated and terrified me greatly, but I couldn't stop. The creature got braver, showing a bit more as time passed. I could now confirm it had a large set of antlers, and its front limbs were not hooves like its back legs, but claws. It watched me almost as curiously as I watched it. I knew then that it was likely a Wendigo, one that decided to watch me, although I didn't dare attempt to approach it, knowing its curious nature might be as deceiving as a wolf smile. Although I never verbally called it this name, I subconsciously named it Branch. It seemed suiting. He started, or I think it was him, pushing over items on my porch like empty paint pots and small decorations, going back to the tree line by the time I come outside. It didn't really bother me as nothing got damaged. Kind of reminded me of a cat, actually. I began speaking to it, not expecting responses. While I painted, I would just ramble out loud, knowing he was just to the trees. I don't know if he listened, but I think he did, as his ears would face toward me the whole time, those long, slightly disproportionate ears. One day he appeared with scars, a few still bleeding, This concerned me, but I couldn't get close to him. He was an injured animal and would even more likely attack me if I got close. After a few days, they healed to pale marks on his skin. This happened a few times, but I learned to ignore it. This routine went on for a good while. I watched him, he watched me, but we kept our distance. But that changed yesterday. He approached me, and I didn't even notice till I saw his shadow. I looked up and saw shaggy black fur that smelled like rotting meat. I could see his cold, empty eyes so clearly now. They were genuinely curious, but hungry. I didn't move. I froze up. I didn't even shiver. After what seemed like an eternity, he turned and headed towards the trees. I didn't dare move until he disappeared among the trees. I went inside and called the man that warned me of him. He agreed to come pick me up when we could. I'm waiting for the man to get here. Branch is staring at me through the window. Excuse me for the wait. I couldn't find much time to write after I posted. A few hours after the man pulled in the front, which, unlucky for me, was where Branch was. I got the meat chop I had pulled out earlier and stepped outside. Branch was staring through the window. When he turned to look at me, I made sure to look at his chest fur rather than his eyes, soulless cold eyes. I threw the meat. He ignored it, didn't even twitch. I started to slowly move towards the man's truck, Branch's eyes tracking me. As I moved off the porch, he started to follow me, his hooves making heavy footfall on the wood. His eyes never left me as I slowly made my way to the car. He slowly followed, staying 3 feet away, no more, no less. When I finally made it in, he was still staring with those cold, empty eyes. The man slowly pulled out and started down the long mountain trail. He started muttering about how I shouldn't have let it get this far, as well as other colorful words and terms. Right now, I'm at his cottage at the base of the mountain. I'm still shaken, and I don't know if I want to risk going back. His wife is lovely and treats me well, as far as guests go, but I know I'll have to leave soon. The man explained that the Wendigo was one well known on the mountain, known for only attacking young females, always leaving the head intact. Now, this is only semi-relevant, as I am a man, but he can't explain why he's taken a sudden interest in me. Maybe he's contemplating eating me. In a few hours, he's taken me back. He's given me food, a gun, several rounds, and a blowtorch. I got home an hour ago. Branch wasn't there, but my porch looked like a tornado passed, and I think there's shit by the doorstep. I quickly went inside and locked the doors, the windows. I don't think he knows I'm back yet, and I don't want him to know. It's been a few hours and no sign of him. I don't want to go outside to tidy up my porch. I'm too scared to. It's hard to swallow the sandwich I made because of the tension I'm feeling, but I have to eat. I think I'm going to take a nap after I finish it. He's here, he's staring into the windows and making distorted huffs and brays, occasionally stamping his hooves on the porch. He can't see me right now because I'm behind the couch. He sounds angry. He's started banging his antlers on the glass. He's trying to break it. It's starting to crack. The glass shattered. My heart is pounding. My ears are ringing. I can smell the rotten meat he reeks of. He crawled in through the window. I think he can smell me. He started knocking over random things, but I'm frozen. I can't bring myself to peek. I might try to make a run for it, or I'll have to wait it out. He just went down the hall. I'm going to go out the front and run. I don't know how far I ran, but the sun went down by the time I stopped, and the temp is definitely below freezing. Luckily, I was already wearing a heavy coat, and I found a small overhang. We'll rest. Hopefully he doesn't find me. I woke up, but it's still dark out. It's only 12. I slept 3 hours. I'm shivering like crazy, but the overhang helps a little, blocking the wind. The forest seems still. Nothing is stirring. Not even the owls are hooting. I'm going to go back to sleep. Hopefully it's light out when I wake up this time. I woke up an hour or so ago and started walking towards the base of the mountain. My limbs feel numb, but the movement has helped. The forest is still eerily quiet, and I keep finding blood puddles and tufts of fur. I think Branch threw a massive tantrum. I need to find a house with people in it. Safety in numbers. I didn't bring the gun. I know, I'm stupid, but I just wanted away from him. I started running again. I heard what sounded like hooves, and I swear I smelled rotting flesh again. If he catches me on his turf, I'm honestly fair game to kill, even if I'm not his preferred food. I found a field of corpses. Deer, bears, rabbits, wolves, birds. Dead animals everywhere. I quickly went around it, holding my breath, trying not to puke. I guess that's why the forest was so quiet. He killed all the animals in a fit, like a violent child throwing a tantrum, a child that could easily rip out my throat and cave in my ribcage and skull. I'm seriously hoping he isn't following me. I can see houses. I think I found one of those retreats for monks or whatever who take vows of silence. I'm going to see if they can help me. So, good news. They happily let me into a living area where I could warm up and provided food and a warm drink. I think it's just milk. They contacted someone and wrote me a note saying that someone would be coming for me to take me off the mountain. A few decided to be curious, so I explained what happened. A few wrote me off, but others gave me scared, shocked looks. They've taken me to bedroom and communicated that I can sleep until the person coming to get me actually gets here. When he does, I'm not going back. My things can stay there, as can Branch. I'll find somewhere else to live, like an apartment, in a city with people. I was able to sleep a few hours before the guy came. I told him to just take me to the nearest town. I'm outside a motel right now, slowly making calls and arrangements. I'm never going back to that place with that thing. Ever. Thanks a lot for watching the video. Till the end, subscribe to Horror in Detail for more videos. Drop your suggestions in comment section.